He laughed at me at the gala. "She's just the ex-wife," she whispered, sipping champagne. What she didn't know, I still owned 42% of the company. And 3 days later, I walked into the boardroom as her new boss. You never mock the woman who helped build the empire, especially when she still holds the keys. Before we begin, comment below which city you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe. My name is Catherine Reed. I'm 38 years old. I live in San Francisco, California. And last week, a 20-something PR manager wearing fake pearls and a too-tight dress called me just the ex-wife at a shareholder gala. She said it like I was part of the carpet, a leftover, a silent footnote in a company I helped build from nothing. I didn't flinch, didn't correct her, didn't throw my champagne in her face, though I'll admit, I fantasized about it for a second. Instead, I smiled, and I remembered everything. The event was held at the Langham Towers rooftop ballroom, one of those places with floor-to-ceiling glass, hanging orchids, and branded champagne flutes that screamed, "Money with taste." It was a celebration, 10 years of success for Eon Tech Solutions, the company I co-founded with my now ex-husband, Landon Clark. I still remember the garage we started in, the folding tables, the burnt coffee, the nights we stayed up until 3 a.m. debugging code and building pitch decks. Back then, I handled the back-end operations, product design, the client interface side. Landon was all charisma and sales, smooth pitchman with a Stanford grin. We were a good team until we weren't. The marriage didn't survive the scale. He became the face, and I became the woman behind the curtain, quiet, precise, and eventually written out. I walked away from the marriage without noise. But I didn't walk away from the company. I kept my shares, kept my board seat, kept my access to quarterly reports, investor memos, and the bylaws I helped draft. But I let Landon play CEO. Let him think the company was his kingdom, because sometimes silence is the best disguise power can wear. Back to the ballroom. The night was full of suits and speeches. The branding played like a highlight reel on every digital wall, growth graphs, product demos, testimonials. Landon stood near the stage in his navy tux, holding court like a senator. The room buzzed with tech elite energy, influencers, developers, investors, and half a dozen people who probably didn't know the difference between HTML and a handbag. And then there was her, Avery Sloan, public relations director. Also, Landon's new girlfriend. I recognized her immediately, not because she mattered, but because she didn't bother hiding. She was clinging to his arm like a clutch bag. Young, loud, sharp-heeled. The kind of woman who thinks eye contact is dominance. I was standing by the catering table, talking with an investor I'd known for years, when I heard it. Avery's voice, fake sweet, just loud enough. "Oh, that's Catherine? She's just the ex-wife. She barely had anything to do with the company anyway." She laughed. Landon didn't correct her. He just sipped his drink and changed the subject. My back was turned, but I felt the words like glass against skin. Just the ex-wife. As if the contracts didn't still bear my signature. As if I didn't hold 42% ownership. As if I didn't write the damn pitch deck that got us our Series A. I turned slowly, made eye contact with Avery, held it for 2 full seconds. "Pleasure to meet you," I said. She blinked, startled. I didn't say anything else. I didn't need to, because while she was busy measuring my relevance in years, I was measuring hers in weeks. Later that evening, after the toasts and the speeches, I slipped out early. I didn't want to hear another story about how Landon rebuilt the company after the divorce. He loved that narrative, the solo visionary myth. He repeated it at every opportunity, conveniently omitting how much of the foundation he still stood on was laid by me. The parking garage was quiet, cool concrete, empty air. I got into my car, shut the door, and just sat there. I stared straight ahead at the steering wheel, hands still, heart steady, and then I whispered to myself, "Okay, game on." Because that moment, that insult, wasn't just about pride. It was about reality. Landon had forgotten something very, very important. He may have worn the crown, but I still owned the throne. The next morning I made 3 calls. One to Danielle, a longtime board member who never liked Landon's charismatic chaos, as she once called it. One to Max, our original IP attorney, now a corporate counsel at a competing firm. And one to my own lawyer, Nina Reyes, who'd helped me quietly rewrite every clause in my divorce settlement to ensure I kept what mattered. None of the calls lasted more than 10 minutes. Because when the work is already done, when the chessboard is already set, it doesn't take long to make the first move. And I'd been setting this move up for years. Now it was time to make it. Landon had forgotten about the CEO recall clause, because he didn't think I would ever use it. He thought I was too gracious, too passive. He thought being quiet meant I had no appetite for war. But he was wrong. I wasn't quiet because I was weak. I was quiet because I was watching.
And now?
Now I was done watching. It was time to take back the company I helped build. Time to remind the board who really stabilized operations in 2018, who got us through the lawsuit in 2020, who handled the 3 biggest clients we'd ever closed. I didn't need a microphone. I didn't need a speech. All I needed was a vote. And I was going to get it. They think if a woman walks away quietly, she's given up. That if she doesn't fight in court or cry on social media or post cryptic Instagram quotes, she must be heartbroken.
Weak. Defeated.
But silence isn't surrender. Sometimes silence is the first move. When I walked out of that courthouse with my divorce finalized, I didn't feel broken. I felt clear. I remember the headlines back then. The whispers in the tech blogs. Power couple splits. Catherine Reed steps away from Eon Tech. Founder's divorce ends quietly, no public drama. Exactly how I wanted it. Because while Landon thought I was stepping down, what I really did was step aside. And in doing so, I made sure I stepped above. It began a year before the divorce. We were already sleeping in separate bedrooms. His hours grew stranger. His phone lived face down. Our dinners became client meetings I was no longer invited to. He started talking about optics. How our brand needed freshness, youth, a singular voice. Translation? He wanted the spotlight to himself. At first, I resisted. Then I remembered something my grandmother once told me. Don't waste time fighting for a chair at a table you built. Own the floor it's standing on. So I stopped fighting and started preparing. The first thing I did was revisit the shareholder agreement. I had co-authored it when we formed the company, line by line, clause by clause. Most people ignore the fine print. I never did. And there it was, buried in section 7.3. Founding shareholders shall retain irrevocable board voting rights unless otherwise waived in writing, regardless of employment status. In other words, even if I left my operational role, even if I stopped showing up to board meetings, I still held 42% of the company. And those shares still held voting power. But I didn't cash in right away. I didn't storm into a boardroom or throw a tantrum in legal. Instead, I moved quietly. I transferred my shares to a holding LLC, registered under my initials, CJR Holdings. Set up a blind trust to manage my dividend payouts. Created a clean paper trail that kept my name off the radar, but my rights fully intact. Landon never asked. He assumed my silence meant detachment. He was wrong. I was doing what any woman does when she's been underestimated. I was getting organized. 6 months after our divorce, I got an email from a junior developer named Priya. We weren't close, but she had admired me, said I was one of the few women in tech leadership she actually felt protected by. Her message was short. They just cut the women's mentorship program. No announcement. HR says it's not ROI positive. I thought you should know. I closed my laptop, stared out the window, and reminded myself, this is why you keep your foot in the door. Because when men like Landon get unchecked power, they trim empathy first. They cut the soul of the company to make space for more mirrors. Over the next year, I kept tabs, read every shareholder report, noted every change in department heads, every lawsuit that was quietly settled, every employee that left with the words just wasn't a culture fit. And I started taking meetings, not publicly, not under my name, Quiet brunches with former department leads. Late-night calls with legal. Brief lunches with two board members who always seemed uneasy with how Landon ran things. I wasn't planning a coup. I was preserving leverage. Because the truth was, Landon wasn't failing yet. But he was getting sloppy. Eon Tech was becoming flashy. Riskier. Looser with boundaries. Product updates were rushed. Branding got vague. Financial reporting incomplete. And then, of course, came Avery. I didn't hate her. She was young. Smart in that eager way new hires are when they still believe their ideas are original. She'd been brought on as a junior PR consultant, but within 6 months, she was showing up in Landon's car. 3 months after that, she was dating him publicly. And 3 weeks later, she was promoted to external brand director, a title that didn't exist before she took it. My phone buzzed that day with a screenshot from a former CFO. Your ex has a type, ambitious and obedient. I didn't reply, because by then, I had already scheduled the meeting. It was a Thursday, rainy, quiet, the kind of day San Francisco does best. I sat across from Danielle, board member since year 2. Brilliant, blunt, the only person Landon never tried to flirt with. She looked at me over her espresso and said, "Why now?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I pulled out the latest shareholder report, slid it across the table, showed her 3 numbers circled in red. R&D spending, down 40%. Employer retention, down 28%. Legal fees, up 61%. Danielle raised an eyebrow. Jesus. He's burning the brand to grow the buzz, I said. He thinks press equals power. And you want to come back? I met her gaze. Steady. Unshaking. I want to save what we built. I want to give the people who bled for this company a reason to stay. And I want to do it before he crashes it for good. She sipped her coffee, then nodded. You'll need 2 more board votes to trigger clause 9.1. I already have them. Her eyes flicked up. I smiled, because she wasn't the first person I met with. And she wouldn't be the last. The next morning, I met with my lawyer. We submitted the preliminary motion to activate an emergency leadership review, a clause hidden deep in the operating charter. I didn't need a scandal. I didn't need drama. I needed a vote. And now, I had the numbers. 3 days later, I received a calendar invite. Subject: Executive Board Session, Emergency Vote. Location: HQ Conference Level 2A. Time: 9 a.m. Sender: L. Clark. He had seen the motion and realized, too late, that I still had the power to use it. I clicked accept, then closed my laptop. Because sometimes, power isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't beg to be acknowledged. Sometimes real power walks into a room after you've laughed it out of one. And it sits at the head of the table, because it built the damn table in the first place. Power isn't always taken. Sometimes it's handed away, piece by piece, by the very person who thought he owned it. Landon handed me mine back the moment he stopped treating me like a partner.
He just didn't know it yet.
I arrived at Eon Tech's headquarters at 8:52 a.m., the day of the emergency session. Polished glass towers. The revolving doors I used to walk through every morning at 6:45, coffee in hand, spreadsheets in mind. The security guard glanced up, didn't blink. He recognized me. "Good morning, Ms. Reed," he said. "Conference level?" I nodded. "Thank you, Martin." Still knew my name. Still remembered. That mattered. I took the elevator up to level 2A. It opened directly into the executive floor, soundproofed, sterilized, full of abstract art no one could name. The boardroom was half full. Danielle was already there, seated at the end, flipping through a folder. Max nodded at me from his seat near the corner. 2 others, silent, unreadable, glanced up, then back at their tablets. Landon wasn't there yet. Of course. He'd arrive exactly at 9 o'clock. Sharp, strategic, always had to make an entrance. I chose my seat. Not at the head, not in the middle, off to the right, diagonal from where he'd sit. A power move?
No.
A quiet reminder. I didn't need the spotlight to own the room. 9 a.m. exactly. The door opened. He walked in smooth as ever. Navy suit, open collar, no tie. Smile calibrated to the room. He saw me. Didn't flinch. Just smiled wider.
"Catherine," he said.
"Didn't expect to see you here." I smiled back. "Clearly." He took a seat at the head, set down a leather folio, tapped his pen twice, his old signal for "let's begin." The board member settled. The room stilled. Danielle cleared her throat. "As submitted under Article 9.1 of the Operating Charter, we've convened an emergency vote to review the standing executive leadership structure of Eon Tech Solutions." Landon leaned back, relaxed, spoke like he already knew the outcome. "Well, before we get dramatic, I'd just like to say that I've always welcomed transparency. If this is about financials, I'm happy to walk through our Q2 pivots and show you." "This isn't about Q2, I interrupted. Every head turned. He looked at me, just a little slower this time. "It's about leadership," I continued. "About direction. And about misuse of authority." "Misuse," he scoffed. "You're serious?" I didn't answer. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out a file, laid it on the table, opened it calmly. Inside, a list of every executive role filled without a board vote over the last 12 months. Internal memos signed only by Landon. A budget analysis showing a 61% increase in discretionary spending. And 2 complaints submitted to HR regarding Avery's promotion, both buried, neither resolved. I slid the folder down the table. It stopped in front of Danielle. "This is what happens when one person believes he's the company," I said. "When ego replaces process. And when relationships replace merit." Landon laughed. Not a real laugh. The kind of hollow chuckle people use when they've just heard a fact they can't afford to believe. "You've been digging, huh?" he said. "Trying to make a little noise before the press forgets you completely?" I tilted my head.
"No, Landon."
"I've been reading, watching, and protecting what I helped build." He turned to the others. "Let's not pretend this is a real vote," he said. "Catherine's been gone for 2 years. She's been out of the game. This company's future isn't her call." Max finally spoke. "She owns 42%, Landon. Her call matters more than yours." Landon froze. He looked around the table. The illusion cracked. The smile dropped, just slightly. "You're joking." Danielle shook her head.
"The vote stands."
"It's in the charter." He looked at me again, but now there was something behind his eyes.
Panic.
And behind that, recognition. He finally saw me not as his ex, not as a ghost from his past, but as what I had always been. His co-founder, his equal, and now his replacement. The vote took 5 minutes. 7 members. Simple majority. The motion. Effective immediately, shall the board relieve Landon Clark of his duties as Chief Executive Officer, pending appointment of new leadership? Hands raised.
1, 2,
3, 4, 5. Motion passed. Silence. Landon stared straight ahead. No words, just breath. Then he laughed again, this time smaller.
"Didn't."
"So, what? You're CEO now?" I stood, collected the folder, met his gaze across the table.
"No," I said.
"I'm just reclaiming my seat." And then I walked to the head of the table, pulled out the chair, sat down, looked at the board. Let's begin. Becoming CEO again wasn't the victory. The victory was what happened after. What you do when the spotlight hits you and you don't blink. When you sit in the chair meant for you, not with vengeance, but with vision. That's where power lives. Not in the win, but in the what next. The morning after the vote, I arrived at Eon Tech HQ early. Earlier than anyone expected. 6:15 a.m. Same time I used to arrive in the old days, before everything became about launch parties and hype videos. Before Landon started acting like the company was an accessory. The front desk security guard blinked when he saw me. "Ms. Reed," he said, standing straighter. "Morning," I replied. "How's your daughter doing? Still playing soccer?" He smiled. "Varsity captain this year." Tell her I said congratulations. It mattered, remembering. Because the company isn't made by who sits in the big chair. It's made by the people who hold the door open. I walked the halls slowly.
Took it all in.
The new branding glossy, cold. The walls had gone gray. The art was abstract and loud. The energy off. The team felt quiet. Not focused, nervous. And I understood why. The company had become a place people survived, not one they built. So I started with a closed-door meeting. Not with the executive suite. With the department heads. 15 people. Round table. No assistants. No agendas. I stood at the front and said one thing. The cleanup starts now. And no one in this room is getting fired, unless they lie. Eyes widened. Shoulders straightened. Then I sat. For 2 hours, I listened. Really listened. And what I heard wasn't surprising. Budgets had been slashed in teams that actually delivered. 2 team leads had quit due to mental health issues, citing unworkable environments. Promotions were inconsistent, based on relationships, not performance. And Avery, the girlfriend, had created a performance scoring system that penalized anyone who questioned her campaigns. I didn't get angry. I got clarity. I ended the meeting with one sentence. From this moment forward, no one will ever have to whisper to be heard here again. Then I stood up and walked into my first executive meeting as CEO. The boardroom was different this time. No laughter.
No old boys club charm.
No performative politeness. Just eyes. Watching. Measuring. I sat at the head of the table. Danielle was to my left. Max on my right. Across from me, HR, legal.
Brand.
Finance. Let's talk structure, I said. First move, I called for a full audit of discretionary spending. Second, I announced the immediate suspension of all positions created without full board approval, starting with external brand director. Avery was out. No press release. No drama. Just a single, clean HR memo. Miss Sloan's role has been dissolved pending organizational restructuring. We thank her for her time. Third move, I met with legal. Quiet room. Tight lips. Clear goals. I asked them to initiate a forensic audit of all company-backed travel, consulting payouts, and strategic partnerships initiated during Landon's final 12 months. I knew what we'd find. Ghost contractors. Fake startup deals. A few consultants who were anything but. I didn't care about punishment. I cared about proof. Because when the press came knocking and they would, I wasn't going to be on defense. I was going to be ready. 3 days later, Landon called me. Blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. He left 2 messages. The first was bitter. You happy now? You always wanted to wear the crown, even when I was the one bleeding for this company. The second was smaller. Weaker. Can we talk? I just want to know what happens next. For me. I didn't answer. Because what happens next for him wasn't my story anymore. What happened next for the company, though, that was mine to write. I called for a full company-wide town hall. No slides. No fluff. Just me. Standing on the stage in front of the people who had watched leaders rise and fall, but had stayed anyway. Some of you know who I am. Some of you only know my name from old files. That's fine, I began. You don't need to trust me because of where I've been. You need to trust me because of what we're going to build next. I paused. The last year has been loud.
Confusing.
Some of you felt invisible. Some of you were silenced. That ends now. I let the silence hang, then said the 3 words I had waited 2 years to say. I'm back. Fully.
Permanently.
And I'm not leaving again. Applause didn't come instantly, but when it did, it wasn't polite. It was real. That night, I stayed late, walked the halls again, alone, stopped at the display wall of old Eon Tech product launches. Photos from years ago, beta teams, pitches, campaigns, and there in the middle was a photo of me and Landon. Our first demo day. We were both grinning.
Young. Hungry.
Hopeful. I looked at it for a long time. Then I walked into the PR suite, pulled the frame down, and put up a new one. Just the team. The real team. Developers. Designers. Ops leads. The ones who never left. Because that's the story I wanted told now. Not about the woman who lost her husband, but the one who reclaimed her company. There are two kinds of collapse. The kind that comes suddenly, with an explosion, a crash, a fall. And the kind that happens quietly, like a building hollowed from the inside. From a distance, it looks fine. But step inside, and the floor gives out beneath you. That was Landon's kind. His collapse didn't come with shouting. It came with emails, with unread messages, with meetings where he no longer had a seat. It started with the press. We issued no public statement after the board vote. No smear. No scandal. But word spread. Someone at the investor gala posted a blurry photo of me at the head of the table. Captioned, "Guess who's back at Eon Tech Eyes Fire, #Horeed, #GameChanger." By morning, 3 tech blogs picked it up. By noon, I had 2 podcast interview requests. By 4 p.m., Catherine Reed was trending on LinkedIn. The headline that stuck? The ex-wife walks in as CEO. The power shift Silicon Valley didn't see coming. And that's when the emails started. From former employees. From women in tech. From investors who had backed Landon and now wanted my strategy deck. One message stood out. I'll be honest, I bought into his charm. But charm doesn't scale. Execution does. Let me know when you're ready for Series D. I read it twice, smiled, then forwarded it to legal. Meanwhile, Landon tried to play the PR game. He posted a vague statement on his personal account. Leadership is about knowing when to let others lead. I've stepped aside to focus on what matters. Wishing Eon Tech continued success. Underneath, thousands of likes. But the top comment said everything. Translation, got voted out by the woman who actually built the thing. And the replies? All fire emojis. All women tagging their friends. All stories about being dismissed, overlooked, talked over, and finally seen. He deleted the post 12 hours later. The final blow didn't come from me. It came from the audit. 3 weeks in, our legal team delivered a 94-page report. Quiet. Neutral, ruthless, $180,000 in consulting paid to a firm owned by Landon's college roommate. No services rendered. $22,000 in company card charges flagged as travel but matched to hotels where no events were scheduled. A personal crypto wallet seeded with funds from a marketing allocation Avery approved without oversight. I didn't forward it to the press. I didn't need to. All I did was file the documentation. And mark it non-criminal for record. Because unlike Landon, I wasn't out to burn bridges. I was out to build a company that no one could take credit for without doing the work. Then came the call. I was in my office, new layout, no desk between me and my team. Just couches, a whiteboard, and a glass wall covered in roadmap notes. Mina buzzed through the line. It's him. I paused. Put him through. Landon's voice came through the speaker. Quiet. No swagger. Catherine. Yes. He exhaled. I wanted to say I get it now. I said nothing. He went on. I always thought the brand was me. That I was the pitch. The face. But it wasn't. Not really. Another pause. I didn't understand what you were doing when you left quietly. But now I do. Still, I said nothing. Then he dropped it. I'm starting over. Something small. Just me this time. No noise. I guess I wanted to say thank you for not torching me. I sat back in my chair, looked out the window at the skyline I now commanded. You did that yourself, Landon, I said.
Calm.
Steady.
Honest.
I just stopped shielding you from the consequences. Silence on the line. Then a click. He hung up. That night, I poured a glass of red. Walked barefoot through the office with the lights low. Paused in the hallway where the old team photos still hung. One picture, dated 2014, stopped me. It was me and Landon at our first VC pitch. He was smiling at the camera. I was off to the side, laptop open, focused on the slide deck. I studied that image. Not with anger. Not with grief. With gratitude. Because that woman, the one slightly out of frame, she stayed the course.
She didn't yell. She didn't beg.
She didn't break. She prepared. And now she was the frame. The next morning, I walked into our all-hands meeting with new org charts, new department goals, and a new initiative. Project Origin, a leadership incubator for women in product, engineering, and strategy roles. Fully funded, fully backed, and open to anyone who'd ever been dismissed as just. Because I was done being just the ex-wife. I was the CEO, and I wasn't going anywhere. Power is easy to claim, but purpose, that's what lasts. Taking back the company wasn't the goal. Rebuilding it into something no one could steal again, that was. The day after Landon's final call, I arrived at HQ with no makeup and a to-do list 10 pages long. Not for press. Not for press releases. But for people. The first thing I did? Kill the hierarchy. No more top-down emails. No more surprise org shifts. No more closed-door strategy huddles that excluded 90% of the people who did the actual work. Instead, I launched what we called listening weeks. Every department, every voice, every opinion. I walked into those meetings with no slides. Just one question. If this were yours, what would you fix first? They answered. And I wrote everything down. Because rebuilding isn't about rebranding. It's about repair. We cut the bloat, streamlined titles, collapsed the vanity roles, and redirected their salaries to product, support, and the DI initiatives Landon had once called non-critical. And then we cleaned house quietly. No drama, just structure. Contracts were reviewed. Ghost consultants gone. Brand deals that offered no ROI, canceled. Instead, I built a new pipeline of creators who had earned their influence, not bought it. We partnered with developers from historically overlooked regions, launched a mentorship program that matched young engineers with team leads across every office, and established a new rule for executive hires. If you've never reported to a woman, you're not ready to lead here. Within 6 weeks, everything started to shift. Slack channels that had been dead for months lit up again. Team leads sent updates before being asked. People stayed late not because they feared for their jobs, but because they cared again. And it showed. Churn dropped by 40%. 2 major clients that were preparing to exit reversed. One of them wrote, "We didn't believe in your company anymore, but we believe in your leadership." And that's when I knew we weren't just rebuilding a business. We were rebuilding trust. But the biggest moment came during the company relaunch. 6 months after the vote.
We didn't do a huge event.
No glitzy live stream or influencer-packed rooftop soiree. We booked a simple venue. 1 floor. Enough chairs for every full-time team member. The lights were soft. The music was quiet. And when I stepped on stage, I didn't wear a power suit. I wore black jeans, a tucked-in blouse, and the same necklace I wore on our first pitch day 10 years ago. I looked out at the room, not as a CEO commanding attention, but as a founder returning home. I began. You've been through hell. Gaslighting disguised as leadership. Promotion structures based on proximity, not performance. Empty mission statements. Quiet retaliations. I paused. I'm not going to sell you a new story. I'm going to rebuild one with you. From the inside out. And then I clicked the remote. Behind me, a new slide appeared. A clean, rebranded logo. 1 word underneath. Eontech. Rewritten. The campaign went viral the next morning. Not because of paid ads, but because one intern posted the full video online, shaky camera, bad audio, full speech. It blew up on Twitter, then TikTok, then Business Insider. She didn't raise her voice. She raised the bar.
She's not just the CEO.
She's the blueprint. I've never seen a woman lead like that in tech, with elegance and thunder. Emails poured in from university students, mid-career women, even a few VCs who had once ghosted me now asking for advisory meetings. I didn't say yes, but I did forward the messages to my team, with a subject line that just read, "This is us now." That week, I walked through the same hallway where that photo of Landon and me used to hang. Now, there was a new one. It wasn't just me. It was the full leadership team, women, men, LGBTQ+, first-gen grads, engineers who used to sit silently in the back row and now ran entire divisions. I stood in front of that photo with Danielle beside me. She said, "You're going to change how this industry sees power." I looked at her and said, "Not power, proof." She smiled, because that's the thing. Power is flashy,
Loud.
temporary, but proof? That's legacy. It's funny what people remember you for. Some remember me as the co-founder who disappeared. Others as the woman who took back the company. Some still whisper the ex-wife who came back with a vengeance. They're all wrong, because what I really am, the architect, not of revenge, of resilience, not of a comeback, of a blueprint, a structure so sound that even when someone tried to build an empire on top of it without me, it still stood. And when the facade cracked, I didn't just walk back in. I rebuilt the skyline. These days, my calendar is full, but not the way it used to be. I take 3 meetings a day. That's it. 2 are with my internal teams. The third, always reserved for one new voice. A woman founder. A first-time leader. Someone who's being underestimated. We don't talk about products or scaling or pitch decks. We talk about how to survive being brilliant and ignored. Because that's the hardest part. Not building. Staying visible while you build. I once had an investor ask me, "Don't you ever wish you'd just left? Started something new with a clean slate?" I told him this.
No.
Because that would have let the lie win. Landon's greatest achievement wasn't the company. It was the illusion that I didn't matter, that I was a phase, a helper, a temporary seat filler in his founder story. Walking away would have made that true. Walking back in, quietly, strategically, irrevocably, made sure no one could ever erase me again. There's a room now in our HQ called the Origin Room. It's not for press, not for investors, not for clients. It's for the team. It is photos from our early days, original sketches, first pitch notes, names, every name of the people who stayed through the dark days. And on the back wall, there's a quote carved into the glass. Not from a tech genius, not from a TED Talk, from me. It says, "Let them forget you quietly, then return and show them what forgetting cost." I get messages every day now, from women in every industry. "I just watched your relaunch video. I cried in my car. My boss said I wasn't founder material. I screenshotted your story and made it my phone lock screen. I didn't walk into my boardroom, but I walked into HR today, and I didn't flinch.